Good morning and welcome everyone to, as those of you who have attended these with me before, you know I struggle with certain labels like webinar, presentation. There's a certain expectation, there's actually not, there's a very specific construct if you want to be a successful marketer with webinars and different things like that. And I've invested plenty of money and spent my time playing with those different equations. And they just don't fit, which is really apropos to what we're talking about today because I've certainly benefited from them, but there's the material benefits, the analytical benefits, then there's the actual like charging of the batteries of your soul, and that's kind of what we're talking about today is a deeper sense of alignment. Now, what's interesting about this moment right now, the reason why for whatever reason, a quiet revolution seems to be the term that I keep landing on. And I love that because there's a certain kind of standing up and standing your ground to the term revolution. And there's something very calm and secure about a quiet version of that. And one of the reasons is because I'm not sharing some things, but too many things today that I haven't felt strongly about for quite some time as a coach. And I've been doing this for a long time. I've been a coach in different capacities for over 20 years. And I've been mentoring and guiding other coaches to create more successful businesses by focusing on more successful outcomes and results and impact on their clients, not just more successful funnels and systems and whatever, for about the last 10, 12 years. So with that, there is something about this information right now that the visual I had just as we were getting ready to get on here this morning is one of my favorite movies of all time is Braveheart. I think it is one of the most magnificent cinematic spectacles if you know what it took to actually film that movie, the most extras ever used in any action sequences ever. Usually it's done in small parts and then all pieced together and whatever else, and a great story and incredible cast. And there's this moment where they realize that they aren't equipped to go up against the English army and their cavalry, the men riding horses. And so they think about, well, what about spears? And so there's this moment in the movie where the English cavalry is charging towards them and their spears are laying on the ground, so the cavalry can't see them. And you hear Mel Gibson going, hold, hold, and you can feel it getting a little bit more intense as they're getting closer. Hold, hold, and then he says, now, and they pull the spears up just at the right moment to get an advantage. Minus the epic violence of this particular scenario, there's something about that in the air right now. There's something about feeling like there are parts to being a coach. There are parts to, and I want to define that specifically today. I want to be really clear about when I say coach, because that's such an ambiguous term. I just want to be clear so that if I do present an argument that feels like I'm against something, I'm antagonizing something, it's with a very specific context and it's not overall, you know. Like I may feel strongly that certain people shouldn't do certain things in their health or in their fitness or in their daily routine, but it would be specific to that person's construct. And that's a big part of what we're talking about today. But there is something that a lot of what I'll share has felt important, really important for a long time. But there's something about it with that hold, hold, now that feels very now right now in terms of what the market is bearing, in terms of what people are starting to shift towards. And what I love is part of the shift is unspoken. A lot of the people that are coming into the field of my coaching practice and many of the coaches that I work with are coming in without the words to describe, and it makes it challenging to find the questions to ask to figure out what it is that they're looking for. And that is because it is not on the same scale that they've been accustomed to. It's not on the same program that has been sold to them and modeled for them for at least the last 30 or 40 years in the coaching industry. So there's something very timely in this that more than ever, which is exciting. I don't feel like it's any less important in terms of what I want to talk about today and the impact it can actually have on another human being, including you, in the way you show up as a coach and the way that you serve people. With that said, there is something about right now. There's something about right now that actually feels like it's got more leverage and more momentum financially and those levels of viability in terms of being able to actually support yourself really, really well that just has a different flavor than it has before. And that's something I'm not accustomed to. Having felt like I never quite fit in, probably since I was 4, but like never feeling like I quite fit in as a coach. Getting tons of feedback on, Paul, you need to be clearer. You need to have a more clear niche. You need to have better funnels that are more systematic. You need more automation. You need more this and that and whatever. And all those things made sense to me, but they didn't resonate. They didn't resonate. And so I was just stubborn enough to do enough of them to see if it would help, but to continue to not quit and come back to how I felt like I could do this intuitively. I could do this different. And I spent plenty of years as a coach trying to do that as some kind of rebellion. Like I was going to rebel against the common thread. I was going to rebel against the status quo. And that certainly didn't help a lot. I don't recommend the energy of rebellion for anything that you care about. But it is a phase that some of us can go through when we wake up, so to speak, to certain things. So there's a very deliberate reason I didn't refer to this as the quiet rebellion, but more as the quiet revolution, and you could even say evolution of things that is playing out in the marketplace, where it's not just advantageous to your soul and your resonance if you fit what I'm talking about today, and if you don't, I would I would ask and beg that you work very hard to not hear anything I say today as being against you or as a knock on you. But I am going to be very biased to the coach that this is for because they've spent the majority of their career, their lives, feeling like the way they naturally want to do this couldn't work, feeling like they try and try and try and it continues to fall flat. And now we have a broader leverage and pull in the marketplace where more coaches that have felt like that can find more success than they have in the past. That's what I'm experiencing. Okay. That's what I'm experiencing with the coaches I'm working with. That's what I'm experiencing in my own business. I'm getting clients at higher rates and with less effort than I've experienced almost in my entire career. And that's been pretty consistent, especially for the last 6 months, if not for the last year. And so it's been consistent enough for me to be like, okay, that's not just a confirmation bias, that's a trend. And then having worked with enough coaches on the things I want to talk with you about today, it's a duplicatable trend, which is really exciting. So, first, let me talk about the history of coaching, just to kind of set this up. I almost feel like it's an obligation to the industry to just give a little bit of a history lesson as kind of an homage. The coaching industry as we know it today started out with the roots of psychology. You've got Jung and Adler and Freud. You've got the development of cognitive behavioral therapy. Then you've got the advancement in the 60s of humanism, which was the first time we actually started considering broadly that we weren't just cogs in a wheel here to just show up, have babies, work hard, and die. That there might actually be something called self-actualization that Maslow brought into play. And then that led to the combination of psychology, self-help literature, Napoleon Hill, Dale Carnegie, that then led to the emergence in a little bit of the 70s, but definitely more in the 80s and 90s of workshops, seminars. Tony Robbins, obviously a huge pioneer in that work. Landmark Forum being another one. Then we became like fine tuning and we got into NLP and behavioral programming, which seemed like the cutting edge. And then we moved into more substantiated mindset theory, and that became the big buzzword toward the end of the 90s and the early 2000s to where we have landed today, where we're finding a much more expansive view of holistic and integrative approaches. And just about every coach out there, in terms of mindset, in terms of personal development, self help, life coaching, business coaching, relationship coaching, spiritual coaching, can track kind of the pieces of their style in one or all of the pieces that I just laid out. Okay, so that's where we find ourselves today in this kaleidoscope of perspectives in coaching, this kaleidoscope of tools that we can use and focuses. And what I want to talk about today is the element of coaching that is kind of the underbelly of all of that. And to do that, I want to differentiate what type of coach you are. And I try to hold types and archetypes loosely because we have such a tendency. We hate to be labeled as human beings unless we ask for it. We love to take the test. We love to be told, what color we are, what animal we are, what Disney princess we are, or whatever it is. And it can give us some really cool insights we hadn't considered. The concern though is if there's dysregulation, if there's any insecure attachment wounds, we tend to give that analysis way more power than we would ever actually give ourselves. And then we find ourselves being dictated by these types and these archetypes. So that's why I ask you to hold those things loosely in this place. But the first differentiator I want to make is just a binary one, just either or, which can be a little bit violent in certain cases, but I think it'll be helpful for our conversation today. And that is where I landed eventually was, are you a people person coach or are you a person coach? And I've done lectures and webinars and all kinds of things on this, so I don't want to spend too much time in the definition, but the simplest way I could put it is actually with a couple of questions. A couple of questions will help you determine if you are a people person coach, which most people have been conditioned to believe they are because that's the food that's out there. People think that they are carnivores because meat is the only thing that's been available to them. Okay, kind of a thing. And I'm not making this a dietary conversation, so please forgive me for even hinting at opening that door. Okay, we'll stay away from that and politics and anything else that could really distract us here. So in this differentiation, I want to ask you just a couple of questions, again, because we are leaning towards the underserved population. And that underserved population usually falls into a few categories. And that's one of like, oh, you see me. Oh my gosh, that's me. All the way to the one who's like, I think that might be me. But I've been like I was stubbornly driving into making whatever was out there work because it's what I was supposed to do, because it's what all the case studies showed is the best way. And sometimes in our nervous system, we feel like is the only way to build a successful coaching business. So the first question, and these aren't massively profound psychometric questions, okay? First question is, have you ever felt that you had to perform or prove something to be taken seriously as a coach? Have you ever felt that you needed to perform or prove something to be taken seriously as a coach? And I would probably add a little context to that outside the realm of where you just wanted to land with another human being in guidance, facilitation, mentorship, coaching. Outside of that natural space, have you felt like you've needed to perform or prove something to be able to draw people into that space? Number two, have you ever wondered or sensed if there was a deeper way to serve your clients? Have you ever sincerely wondered or sensed that there was a deeper way to serve your clients? Number three, have you ever felt called or a deep sense of purpose to being a coach? Have you ever felt called or a deep sense of purpose to being called as a coach? So now, it's not a lockdown, foolproof system, but if you answered yes to one or a few, have you ever felt you had to perform or prove something to be taken seriously as a coach? Have you ever wondered or sensed if there is a deeper way to serve clients? And have you ever felt called or a deep sense of purpose to being a coach? Then you probably have some significant ties to a person coach or major ties to a person coach. And either way, you're going to probably find some wonderful value to this. Now, this is not saying that the things that are taught out there are wrong. It's just saying that the sequencing and the resonance for a person coach, it is wrong in the sense that there are certain sequences that are like different polarities, different ways to come from, different foundations to build as a person coach than a people person coach. A people person coach tends to wake up in the morning and their soul is charged by the idea of scale, by the idea of systems and duplication. A person coach wakes up in the morning and their batteries are charged by meeting with another human and holding a space that creates a unique, sometimes challenging, and sometimes inspiring, and everything in between container for another human to be able to experience themselves in a way that they wouldn't be able to without having that person holding that container, providing that witness, and guiding, facilitating whatever it might be. So you might say a people person is a little bit more of an engineer, and a person is a little bit more of an artist. Okay. And one of the signature elements of an artist feels things deeply, feels things big. That's kind of their live by the sword, die by the sword. It's part of what makes them so in touch with the art, but it's also what can work against them from actually getting their art out there. And so, just as artists have deserved to learn how to get past some of the gifts that have kept them in, that's what I'd like to do with person coaches. So let's talk a little bit about the existing model. And I'm going to be intentionally abstract with this. I understand there's an extraordinary amount of nuance in this. I've been in this industry for a long time. I've worked with some of the biggest. I had a group out of Tony Robbins' camp that wanted to acquire a coaching company that my father and I had built before. I've been on stages all over the world. Like I'm not an amateur here. I understand there's a lot of nuance to this. But for the sake of this particular focused conversation, I'm going to be a little bit more abstract and a little bit more pointed in some areas. But please understand if you're noticing, well, may kind of depends. Yes. And we're speaking to an audience that has been grossly underserved and grossly not misunderstood. And I'd like to think and give the benefit of the doubt that that has been unintentional. I'd like to think that people are going, well, this works for me, so hopefully it'll work for you. But I'm going to not say hopefully, I'm going to say it will definitely work for you. And I mean, can we just, I'll just say this. I want to be really clear about this. The coaching industry for the people that I'm working with, people that I'm looking for, is widely experienced as a pyramid scheme. The people who are showing up as content creators, marketers, and salespeople claiming that they are coaches, convincing you then that well, you're a coach too, so you need to learn the marketing, the sales, and the content creation, only to feel like your soul is getting sucked out of you as you're trying to do that. However, the testimonials, the case studies, the oh my gosh, they have so much freedom. Oh my gosh, look at the life they're living. It has caused some of us, especially person coaches, to turn our back on our natural orientation. It makes sense. Our survival instincts are always going to be stronger than anything else. And so, how good is a mission if you can't feed your family? How good is a purpose if you can't live, the life that you want within reason? The challenge is you've got these content creators, marketers, and salespeople that I'd like to be are good humans that are doing things that they believe in, even though it may be overreaching, who are sitting there saying, yeah, go create a course. Look at how much money I made building a course, which is hilarious because guess what their course was about? How to build a course and make money so that you could buy that course on how to make money to sell a course to people on how to make more money, to sell a course on people creating a course to make more money. That, my friends, is a pyramid scheme. Okay? As soon as it got harder to coach because there was a lack of depth and deep integration, it started becoming courses and certifications because it got people to buy more money to then sell that to someone, to sell that to someone, to sell that to someone. And we lost the deep art of coaching, of actually meeting a singular, unique human being and even meeting a group of them. And again, I am not anti-course. I've built some courses. I've built a course that added an extra $400,000 of revenue to my business over a year. Like I'm not anti-course, but man, it is a massive distraction from the fear that how you want to build your business won't work for most person coaches. It is certainly an eventually. Scale is certainly an eventually. But as the billionaire mentor told the creators of Airbnb early on in their journey, said, do what isn't scalable before you scale. Do what isn't scalable so that you actually can scale. And I think that's super important. And a lot of the person coaches I've worked with that I can try and get them to loosen their grip on scale and systems and courses and just get back to the heart of coaching, get back to unraveling the fear that I'm just going to be trading time for money. Okay, that's true of everything. It's true of everything. So rather than trading time for money doing something that feels like it's not in alignment with you, let me teach you how to trade time for money and doing something that resonates more in a way that you probably haven't been taught to trust. It usually gets addressed as lip service to get your attention so you feel like they get you, but then they sell you the content creation, marketing, and sales, not the resonance and the depth. So here's the existing model. The existing model in abstract has been a focus on on three things: mindset, outcomes, and authority. That's been the primary model of coaching for at least the last 20 years, if not probably since the 80s. Okay. The primary focus of coaching has been on mindset, outcomes, and authority. All right. The challenge is that's the word that was used. Mindset, that sounds cool. Outcomes, I certainly want those. And authority, who doesn't want to feel like they have more authority or that they're putting their trust in the right authority? And I haven't been doing this since the 80s, so I can't speak for that entire experience. But in the 2 decades that I've been doing this, under the surface, whether intentional or not, I'm not here to make to indict anyone's intentions. Mindset actually turned into manipulation, outcomes actually turned into escaping, and authority turned into comparison. Period. And it was sold and it was sexy and it had all the right poles and strings to yank on and manipulate and all the things. And it meant well. Any good content creator, marketer, salesperson knows that it's really hard to sell something, it's really hard to create something that doesn't have value. But just because it has value and they can show you that it has value for certain people doesn't mean it is in alignment with you. And what feels like that Braveheart scene, hold, hold, hold now, pulling the spears up. There's something about right now that feels like there are more people looking for something different and don't even know what they're looking for. But here's my best at sharing what I think they actually are looking for. And there's a lot behind each of these words, but we only have so much time today. I think people actually want, rather than mindset, which is really manipulation, which those of you who've heard me speak before, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Okay. But it is frustrating when you are using manipulation thinking that it's transformation. When you're using something that gets you a short-term adjustment, but not a long-term evolution, that gets painful. That gets frustrating. That becomes like a drug. You need a bigger and bigger dose to get the same high. Okay, so you become more and more dependent on it, which is great because that continues to make the aforementioned audience more and more money. So of course they're going to be very motivated to stay on track with this. I think people actually want, rather than mindset that is manipulation, outcomes that is escape, and authority that is comparison, I think people actually want deep integration. They want to feel like they can be themselves. And most people don't even know what that actually means because their identity is their coping mechanisms. Their identity has been shaped since sensory dysregulation as a child to feeling like, oh, this is me. No, this is the version of you've created to deal with what's inside of you. Imagine if that wasn't inside of you the way that it currently is. What would reveal it? How much more of you would emerge? That's deep integration. Presence. People want to feel like they don't have to chase to the top of the mountain anymore. The finish lines are getting less and less motivating. Any of you who have worked in companies that have emphasized a finish line, whether in business building, in health and fitness especially, people are getting especially exhausted. People don't want finish lines anymore. They don't want the before and afters. It's short spark. It's not getting the payoff. And there are some people that still do, but because it's dwindling, it's getting more and more expensive in time, energy, and actually money to sell to those people. It's not the same return because it doesn't have the same grab that it did before. People are burnt out and exhausted of this mindset, outcomes, authority model They want deep integration. They want presence. They want where they're at right now to feel more and better. There's some part of them realizing that chasing it out there is exhausting and that it never ends. And you just continue to self-abandon, to convince. You wake up every morning needed to convince yourself that you're enjoying what you're doing. And because the part of your mindset, the very thing that they sold you to manipulate your own system, has access to a pharmacy, your brain does, has an access to a pharmacy of chemicals, it can actually release those chemicals when you convince yourself strong enough that you are loving it, you are enjoying it, to feel like you actually are. And that's been a difficult spell to motivate people to consider and look at and to break down because it's very convincing. And for a long time in my career, it was difficult. It was more difficult to find people that wanted to do that than it was to find people who wanted to double their income, that wanted to scale their business. And that's why I spent the first 10 years as a business coach primarily. That's what I was known for. I was known for increasing people's income, growing their business, breaking those ceilings the glass ceilings they just couldn't figure out. And it wore on me on like in my bones. And so I believe that people are looking for what I would call integration, presence, and witness. The challenge is even the coaches, they're like, yes, that's what they want, and that's what I want to provide. Even person coaches have been steeped in the mindset, outcomes, and authority that they're trying to adjust that and but still tracking that dirt into the house, so to speak. And it gets in the way of having the success that I'm seeing coaches that are willing to go in deeply integrating themselves, presencing themselves, and witnessing themselves, not alone, by the way, and we'll talk more about that in a moment, that they're starting to know that it's different now in an amazing way. And there's a lot of person coaches who hope that it's different, believe that it's different, but still aren't watching it actually manifest, it actually come into fruition. But we want to know. We want to know. And there are three different ways that as human beings, biologically, psychologically, neurologically, we grasp knowing. Okay? Three different ways that we grasp knowing. And one is propositional knowing, one is perspectival knowing, and one is participatory knowing. Now, this is the area where I could go down some deep rabbit holes, and I get lovingly pointed out the fire hose and the you lost me on this, whatever kind of stuff. So I want to see if I can do this in a really simple way. Okay, you have a natural part of you that just wants to know, wants to have a grasp, a grip. That's what we're calling knowing. You want to have a grip on your world, a grip on your life, a grip on what's going on in your children's world. You want to have a grasp on what's possible for you in your life. That's what we're referring to as knowing. And there are three ways that we can do that as human beings. The propositional way is we understand it in our head. Okay? We grasp the idea of living that way, the idea of being able to do that. That's the propositional knowing. The perspectival knowing is we feel it through experience. Not we experience it in our head. No, we understand it in our head, but we feel it in the experience in our body. That's the perspectival knowing. Then participatory knowing is we live it and we become it. It's the propositional knowing is at something, so we're looking at something and knowing it. The perspectival knowing is from the experience of it, and the participatory is with all the parts of us and those around us that we're experiencing that with. Coaching up to this point has been almost entirely dominated by propositional knowing. That's mindset. It's the idea, it's the understanding, and that's the easiest one to manipulate. No wonder we're so addicted to it. It's not hard to change an idea. Anyone who's seen Frozen and the rock people who are like, oh, thank goodness it hit her in the head, that's easy to change. If it hit her in her heart, that's the perspectival knowing, the feeling of the experience, that would have been different. That would have been more difficult. Okay. And yes, I did just make a cartoon reference and grew up with three daughters. And so, yeah. But it was a profound insight You can find them all over the place in movies like that. So the challenge is coaching up to this point has tried to claim perspectival knowing and participatory knowing, but has tried to do it with the construct of propositional knowing only. That's why I created whole body mindset as a charge forward of understanding mindset is way more than the mind, the thinking, the ideas, that there are multiple minds. And there's a feeling mind. That's the perspectival mind. And or excuse me, that's the participatory mind. And there's the emotional aspect of mind, which is the perspectival, and so on and so on. So just from that standpoint, for those of you looking for a little bit more less, I don't know, woo-woo or whatever, biologically, coaching is heading towards having all three because propositional knowing has been in disguise, trying to show up as perspectival and participatory knowing. And it's been robbing people of genuine transformation. It's been leaving us continuing to loop in manipulative mindset, escapism outcomes, and comparison-based authority. Okay? And it's shifting, it's changing. So, what we're looking for is a new orientation, a new orientation. And what the market seems to be doing, as far as I can tell, and I've got my fingers in quite a few pies in different industries and different people, and I've definitely got I've got some amazing friends who I believe would understand why I'm sharing what I'm sharing about what they do in marketing and what they do in systematic sales and what they do in content creation. And again, those could be tremendously sequentially beneficial for a people person coach. But there's a lot of person coaches who are masquerading unknowingly as people person coaches because they think that's the ante to the game. That's what they have to do to be able to be the person coach they want. They have to build the business because they don't want to just own their job. They don't want to trade time for dollars. Actually, they do. And actually, I love nothing more than showing them how to and to not have it swallow their schedule, not have it take over their life, and not have it mean they need to settle for some coaching version of minimum wage. They can actually make a phenomenal living. I don't promise person coaches millions of dollars. Most of the people online that are promising you millions of dollars, it's like, look, I look at my seven-figure revenue. We made $1 million, but we're not going to tell you that we spent $990,000 to make that $1 million. That's what it's like out there right now. That's not far off. Okay. One of my dear friends does marketing for some of the biggest people out there that you could think of in the coaching space. And he posted the other day, he said, I'm always in awe, I'm paraphrasing here. He said, I'm always in awe that seven-figure gurus can't sign five-figure contracts and can't make four-figure payments on them. Let me say that again. I'm always in awe of how many seven-figure gurus sign five-figure contracts and can't make four-figure payments. And yet they're showing up in all kinds of different ways. And they can do that when we're just focused on the propositional knowing. That's the easiest manipulated knowing that there is, but it's also one of the most expansive. So of course it's an important part of this. But in the new orientation, oversimplifying, I'll admit, whereas we used to want to pursue like a unique product, a unique system, a unique program, in the new orientation and the quiet revolution, that is you. It's not a certification. It's not a modality. It's not a tool. Those things are fantastic, by the way. But too many person coaches have propped those up in front of them, thinking that's how I'll penetrate the market. That's how I'll get people's attention. And it blocks the very unique frequency and resonance that is you as a very unique human being. And when you just make that shift alone, not just propositionally, not just in the head, but you can feel that experience and you can live and become that, you find greater levels of success. Isn't it interesting that what people are craving is what you are going to want to learn to use to have a more successful business, to create a wonderful income? What does wonderful income mean, Paul? Well, again, I'm not promising person coaches millions of dollars, But I feel very confident that I can show a person-person coach how to land solidly in $150,000 to $350,000 a year before needing significant marketing tools, funnels, and whatever else. Not even needing a website, in fact. Doesn't mean you can't build those things as you go along. I'm playing in some of those areas, but it's because I've moved beyond that range. And now I'm curious about what else there might be. And for whatever reason, feeling called to turn around and teach how I got solidly into the high end of that range without needing to succumb to all that manipulative marketing content creation stuff. I mean, you can look at my social media, it's sporadic at best. I know how to do it, but it doesn't resonate. But I still do it because it's a number of reasons that we can talk about another time. But it is a place to showcase and experiment with me as the unique product. Okay? Also in the new orientation, a structured curriculum. Okay? A structured curriculum is no longer required. Having it, just like modalities and tools and certifications, great. But you will want it to be secondary to the client. You don't acquire a client to insert them into a structured curriculum that doesn't provide deep integration, presence, and witness. They are the curriculum. Propositionally, in the mind, I'm sure that sounds fantastic to you, especially if you're a person-person coach. But as I've experienced, if you're not creating the success I'm talking about right now, you haven't gotten into your perspectival and participatory knowing of that, meaning trusting that in your bones. Because if you did, then you would probably be here to get a little bit of an edge to take that, 150 to $350,000 income just that much higher. Okay. But if you're not there or beyond there, then there is a deeper sense of knowing that you'll want to find in terms of that perspective and participatory of the client is the curriculum. You just happen to have some tools and structured curriculum and things that you have access to when the intuitive thread asks for it. Another part of the old orientation moving into the new orientation in this quiet revolution is a focus on destination and achievement. Now, it's still spicy because we've spent a lot of years being driven towards the dopaminergic drive of the finish line and the outcome and the destination. So it's still in the propositional knowing there, but it is losing its momentum in terms of people actually putting their money where their mouth is, people actually committing at higher levels because it doesn't feel right. There's something in them, just like this new generation that I'm not here to argue that they're doing a fabulous job of it, but I'm glad they're doing it. And that's they're intuitively looking back at previous generations and calling BS on the way they're supposed to live. Because the outcomes that they were told they would get if they lived that way are proving to be BS. Oversimplification, but like, hey, you need to go to school and work hard and provide for your family and you'll be happy. And they're looking at their parents going, like you are? Kind of a thing. Like, there's a lot of nuance to that, but like, yeah, it's different now. And it always could have been, but it's coming to a head. We've got that hold, and now it's coming up. And one of the big ones is destination achievement is now moving into authentic. What I really believe people are craving is authenticity of themselves. Some part of them can tell it's buried under coping mechanisms and triggers and all this stuff and ideologies to allow them to show up in a way that their environment has told them they're supposed to show up. David White, one of my favorite poets, beautiful human being, wrote a poem called All the True Vows, where he talks about going into the woods and reflecting into the water. This is an internal journey he's talking about, and how there you can make a promise that to break would kill you. But then he goes on at the end of the poem to say the only way to make that vow is to break the vow that you made first. What he's alluding to is in the depths of you, in this perspectival, participatory, newly oriented space, you can make a vow to be you, which a lot of people don't even know what that actually is. They think they do. Think they do. Mindset manipulation, okay, right? But perspectively and participatorily, it hasn't clicked yet. Otherwise, you would be experiencing more success as a coach. I guarantee it, it is that simple. But the vow you've got to break to do that is the vow that we all made when we were too young to remember that we would be what everybody else wanted us to be. Because that's how we would feel safe, and that's how we would feel loved, and that's how we would feel accepted. That vow was made in a part of us that we don't interact with very commonly anymore because we've grown up. And I think there are people craving figuring out how to get back to those parts of themselves. And that is where the unique product is no longer a product, it's you. Okay. The structured curriculum is no longer a structured curriculum, it's the client. Okay. And it's no longer a destination or achievement, it's authenticity. Now, what's super fun is you can have all the other things. I am not anti-achievement and destination. I'm a big fan of those things, but not at the cost of authenticity. There's a sequence here, and a person-person coach is the against the grain, natural, original instruction sequence that deserves to be empowered right now. Okay? Deserves to learn how to bring the uniqueness that is them, that they no longer need to show up as the coach. They just need to learn to show up. They don't need to show up the right way. They are that. They are the unique product. And they don't need to depend on a structured curriculum. Having them can be great, but to depend on one is not necessary when the unique client you are going to attract from your deeper resonance they are going to reveal their curriculum to you. And you're going to be able to provide the guidance to that authenticity with that equation of you as the unique product and them as the unique curriculum, rather than convincing them to hire you because of an achievement or outcome they could have. I've thought many times, like, oh, I need to go back to outcomes because that's how you get people to coach with you. But the challenge is if they hire you for an outcome or achievement as the primary energy, then you're going to spend all your coaching session chasing that achievement or outcome rather than actually finding their authenticity, which when you found the depths of your imagination and creativity, the depths of your authenticity, and you can feel safe to actually be you, there is no goal on this planet that you can authentically hold and pursue that you cannot achieve. I believe that wholeheartedly. Okay? Let's have a little fun. Let me be a little bit more specific. Would that be okay? Having some fun in preparation for this, I found five really commonly taught, proven, right, proven strategies out there for building your coach business. And I just want to give you a little bit of flavor of what it feels like to orient them differently. Would that be okay? Okay, cool. So the first one is just pick a niche. Niche down, right? And who's heard this before? Like the niches and the riches kind of thing, right? I've heard this my entire career. And I've played that game before and sometimes really frustratingly believed that it was holding me back from growing my business. And so because I believed that propositionally, that's what I perspectively and participatorily created. Okay. But here's the challenge. The promise of just pick a niche is that clarity creates cash. Okay. And who doesn't want that? Person coaches, we've all negotiated that whole I don't care about the money, but I care what I can do with it. And that whole whatever energetic gymnastics that we create. So the promise is that picking a niche, niching down creates cash, that clarity. The reality, here's the reality. Most coaches niche down too soon. And in my experience, a lot of person coaches never need to. And when you niche down too soon, you shrink your truth and your experience and your audience. Okay. Now, if you are a people person coach, that's probably a good idea. It's probably a good idea to isolate that a little bit more. Um, but as a person coach, what you thought niching was doing, but everyone told you the opposite is true. For a person coach, your gut was correct. You felt like you were limiting yourself by niching, by getting more specific with what you do. Now, there are certain marketing messaging elements and nuances that I think are fun to play with. But the dependence on that, the manipulated dependence on that, it doesn't work. So instead of shrinking your truth in your audience by niching down too soon or at all, You will want to learn to get rooted before you get narrow. Get rooted before you get narrow. And that's about learning your essence as a unique human being before crafting your elevator pitch. In fact, a lot of person-person coaches I work with, the elevator pitch becomes like playful kind of stuff because you still need to talk to people. You're still going to want to tell people that you're a coach in different roundabout ways, but it's going to be with a very different energy, a very different resonance when you learn to be rooted first, not just propositionally. I keep meeting so many person-person coaches who nod their heads and like, Paul, you're right. Yes, I totally agree with this. Awesome. And I was like, yeah, and how are you doing in your business? Ugh. Okay, cool. That tells me that we were going to want to take this rootedness beyond the propositional to the perspectival and the participatory. We're going to want to get this deeper. And guess what? By you doing that, you're going to be that much more prepared to trust yourself and being able to do that with the unique curriculum of another human and helping find their authenticity. Number two, post every day to stay relevant. Who's heard this before? Post daily. You got to find the consistency. You got to rock the algorithm. Okay, here's the challenge. The promise that's made is consistency builds trust and the benefits of the algorithm. Here's the reality for a person-person coach. That volume without resonance is just noise. The algorithm may or may not like it. It's changing all the time, but your soul, your deeper self won't. And that's one of your superpowers, is that alignment, that resonance, that authenticity. Instead, speak when you are stirred, which has two parts, both, oh, okay, I speak when I'm stirred, and learning how to stir, okay, are two important things for a person-person coach because we feel deeply. So there can be a lot that gets in the way of the stir. But there are ways to be able to align, to clarify, to clear some of that clutter so that you feel more like you have a more accessible relationship to the stirring of your soul. One post from your heart and soul can move far more than 10 from your head. Number three, create a signature offer. You need a signature offer. You need a package. And I'm not saying you don't. Again, we're not against these things. We're just pointing out where we've been taught to put our trust, which means where we're also putting our power, where we're giving up our own authenticity for the sake of manipulated authority. Okay. So the promise is that having a package equals professionalism, and we want to be seen as a professional, as a coach, so that people will want to hire us because that's what they're looking for. Well, you have this beautiful thing in your brain called a reticular activation center, or if that's what you believe people are looking for, that's the evidence it's going to look for. Okay. However, with this promise, the reality for a person-person coach is that templates like that, with that kind of energy. Again, not saying you shouldn't have a package. In fact, I give very particular guidance around which type of person-person coach you are, around what kind of package you would want to build, but without becoming energetically dependent on it. Because when that happens, templates will muffle your magic. Your work isn't a formula, it is a frequency, if you will. So instead, what you want to learn to do is design offers that emerge organically, consistently, transformatively from you and your clients' actual transformative experiences, not market analysis, not what seems to be trending. Because as a person-person coach, you're not going for everyone. You're going for certain people. And as you clear some of this stuff up, you only need a few people to do really, really well. Okay? Number four, follow this seven-figure funnel. Who's experienced information on funnels? Who's played with funnels? Anybody? Yeah? A couple nodding heads. Not a lot of hands raising. Are we tired this morning? Oh, thank you. Thank you. Hey, our hands work. Yay. Okay, cool. I mean, I was going to be really impressed if you guys were able to get on Zoom with no hands. So, okay. So, the seven-figure funnel. Follow this. The promise. Here's the promise. And man, this one's been intoxicating for me. Automation, automated abundance. Automation, oh my gosh. It feels like jumping into the gold coins like in DuckTales, you know? Like it's just like, oh my gosh, look at all the things that are possible from automated abundance, right? Okay, the reality. for person-person coaches. The reality is that most high-ticket funnels feel very empty. And for those of you that work intimately, empathetically, transformationally, energetically, it just, ouch, feels very empty. So instead of these seven-figure funnels, you will want to learn something that I have learned to call a whisper funnel. A whisper funnel is something that allows you to make your brand feel like a conversation, not a conversion machine. Okay. It may not look like some of the traditional funnels, while it also can, this model can be inserted into traditional funnels to allow them to breathe life into them. If you've already got some that you're using, I can show you how to be able to make it more resonant and more in alignment with you as a person-person coach. Because as a person-person coach, you're not trying to build an audience. You're trying to attract people that want to work with you. Okay. As a side note on that, one of the greatest challenges for a lot of person-person coaches is they think that they need to attract people that need to coach with them. And that is exhausting. That is why you get so drawn into building courses and scaling and whatever, because you thought that the best way to build your business was find people who need to work with you. But that's exhausting. You want to find people who want to work with you. That's very fun, very fulfilling. Number five, charge what you're worth. Okay. I've never met a person-person coach who hasn't struggled with charging, with pricing, with money. Okay. It can be a really tricky energy for sure. It's one that I love to have fun with. I think it's a great playground to play on in a lot of ways. But get this, the promise to charging what you're worth is that mindset equals money. You buy all the books, go to this money mindset, okay? And I'm not knocking on these things at all. But here's a really important difference, the reality for a person-person coach. Your worth is not a price tag. It is a posture. Your pricing will get distorted when it's used to prove yourself. When you have to use your pricing as proof, ugh, that's where we cut off our connection and our energy. So instead, price for potency, not proof. That is one of the more energetic nuances of all, but it is an incredibly important one and one that we dive deep into in the person-person and unmarketable coach project. Okay. Because what you want to do, and it's very difficult for a lot of even people persons get stuck in this trap. And it's very difficult to admit that your rates were more of a reflection of your fear, not of your actual rhythm. So you'll want to find a connection to your rates and your pricing that is connected to your rhythm, not to your fear. Okay. So those are our five very common proven strategies just to give you a feel for this different orientation. Okay. That even in a webinar, there's only so far we can go in terms of accessing propositional knowing. But what I'm building in the Unmarketable Coach project is a deeper posture and position and integration into all three levels of knowing to not to teach you necessarily how to build your coaching practice, how to show you that you are that and being able to connect to that and trust that and not just in a Pollyanna woo woo just believe in you kind of way in a biologically intelligent way in a biologically intelligent way, a sustainable way, a practical way. This isn't just let's make you feel better about being broke as a coach. That I mean, there's plenty of programs that have tried to do that. Um, this is different, and especially because of what the market is calling for, that it isn't even sure it's calling for. Like my last three clients all came on under the premise of I'm not totally sure what you do, but I think I want to do it with you. I just met with someone who works in biotech and consults with multi-million-dollar pharmaceutical companies and like comes across initially as like hardcore. And at the end of it, um, it was like, I'm not sure what you do, but it terrifies me. And I think that's why I might need to do it. And having that resonance, having that space without needing to convince and unnecessarily persuade is so important, and the market is getting more and more ripe for it. One of the things that I've created to help in this journey is the unmarketable coach archetypes. Okay. Yeah, I like cute stuff too. And the unmarketable coach, be unmarketable on purpose, I think is cute and fun and rad and all the things. Okay. But it's a shell representing much deeper work that we're talking about today. But I found that if you can see yourself in something, that you'll be more willing to step into it and see what it can show you inside of you. And so that's where the four archetypes came from. How many of you have taken the unmarketability test? Okay. Okay, quite a few of you. If you haven't, please, regardless of what you feel or want to do after today's presentation, we've just got a few minutes left for those of you who are looking at the clock. Um, Please go take that. Just go to unmarketablecoach.com, unmarketablecoach.com. A person coach by traditional marketing standards is an unmarketable coach. And my mission is to show them how to be unmarketable on purpose and to be really successful. And the four archetypes have been pretty rad. In fact, I was kind of caught me off guard. I met with a gentleman a couple weeks ago who took the unmarketability test, and I met with him in a complimentary deep dive and just shared with him the deeper elements of the profile. And that was it. And he was like, I think I might want to work with you. And I was like, great, that's not what we're here to talk about in this deep dive. Let's set up another conversation because I really want to honor that container with people. That's part of a person coach. Whereas like the traditional thing is, well, you got to leverage that, Paul. You got to close. You got to get them while they're in it. And I was like, no, because when you do that, then you're chasing that through the whole coaching engagement. And that's exhausting. That's what convinces you you need to scale and you need to build more courses because doing that is exhausting. But when you allow them to talk themselves into it and out of it and whatever, it's a different game. And I love teaching people how to do that because it just opens a whole new world as a person coach. So I have this deep dive with him, and he comes back a couple of days later and says, Paul, I just went to an event and I landed my first personal. He's been working for another company doing coaching for them for quite some time and came to me because he wanted to build his own coaching practice. And he's like, I just went to an event that I was helping some other friends out with their booth and stuff, and I met someone and landed a $60,000 a year client. And the majority of why I think that worked is because of you telling me what type of coach I am. It completely altered the way I approached them, the way I felt about me, and thank you. And I was like, holy crap, like a $60,000 a year client from a 30-minute deep dive. Like I think these archetypes might actually be really helpful for people to find themselves in the flow of the person type coach. So I'd like to just do a brief overview on these archetypes for those of you who are not super familiar with them, or those of you who haven't had a chance to meet with me on yours. So there's four archetypes, okay? Each one is super powerful in their own way. And I'm finding that person coaches, okay, these are all person coaches, but slightly different nuances, have more than one of these elements prominently in them, but there seems to be a really dominant one in most people. And that's what the test is designed to do, is to gently find the more dominant one to start there. But it doesn't mean there isn't interesting reflection in all of them. The first one is the muse. The muse. So the muse archetype is the archetype that ignites people's imagination. Okay, the muse's presence is their greatest asset. They just being present makes people feel like possibilities are real. Like they feel differently around this person than they would just thinking about it themselves or being at a seminar or whatever. The challenge for a muse is they naturally resist systems and formulas that feel like it's flattening their magic, like it's stealing away their out of the box creativity. Okay. But a muse is not here to sell a system. You're here to stir souls. You're here to stir people up in beautiful, inspiring, fun, sometimes disruptive ways. So that's the muse archetype in a person coach. The mirror is the next one. The mirror is the archetype that cuts through the fog, cuts through confusion, and then reflects the truth of that back to the other person, and does so in a way that even if they're afraid to see it, it can be done in a way that they might be able to see it at a deeper level of knowing than they have been before. The mirror tends to speak the unspoken, but not as the I tell it like it is, not as the I'm just candid with people. That's not a mirror. That's not a person-person coach. That's a dysregulated nervous system. But the mirror can speak the unspoken, dissolve the fog, and create clarity that the person wasn't able to see. The oracle is the archetype that sees deep patterns and connections that most people miss. That have this really incredible intuitive sense. They often feel very alone in the world because just like oracles in ancient Greece would stay in caves and be drawn out to be asked for guidance that was very difficult for an oracle to give with direct and very inadequate words. So they usually gave it poetically. They usually gave it, it felt cryptic, but there was in terms of the words, but in terms of the deeper essence of the message, it was quite deep. And that's what an oracle archetype does today, holding like a sacred thread, if you will, weaving wisdom that guides people through deep and hidden terrain often. An oracle is beautiful at being able to draw out the deeper mysteries of what someone might be running into and what they're not quite sure they understand. They're so aware this is my problem, but everything they've tried doesn't seem to resolve it. And an oracle can provide beautiful, deep guidance and unraveling and being able to do that. Then the anchor is the fourth archetype. The anchor's signature is the steadiness, the safety that they can provide to another person in a chaotic world, and not as an escape or an asylum of some kind, but really feeling safe for that person to let other parts of themselves be seen and witnessed, that without doing that and actually addressing them would continue to hold them back. Okay, so that anchor, your gift is making people feel held enough to be able to risk because it feels very risky. So it's not just making them feel held and coddled and whatever. It's making them feel held so that they feel encouraged, empowered to take the risks of becoming who they really are. So I found that those four archetypes are pretty comprehensive in a person-person coach. I've worked with already some people-person coaches who wanted to expand and develop their person-person side as well, because it's like introvert extrovert. We've all got both, but the orientation we have, even though it might just be slight, we'll usually experience it in big ways. And there just hasn't been a lot out there in my experience, and I've looked for years. There hasn't been a lot out there to really address and support and meet the person-person coach deeply. Okay. So our time is up um, in terms of this conversation. I don't have a slide or a constructed offer. I simply have an ask that if you want to take this conversation further, if you want to explore ways that what's happening, what's shifting, regardless of how frustrated you've been in building your own coaching business, or there are several businesses that you can bring a coach-like energy to, even working for somebody else, and you'd like to develop that more. You'd like to dig in, even if it's not the only thing you're going to do, or you'd just like to explore your own inner work based off of this for doing something completely different, just living your life. I would be honored to continue that conversation with you. For those of you who have never had an individual conversation with me, um, I understand how I can come across sometimes. I have a deep resonation in my voice, and I'm a very large human and man. I understand that. But I know there's some people here that even just glancing up and smiling a little bit can attest that I am in all regards of the term a big teddy bear. I have a little bit of all four archetypes: the mirror, the muse, the oracle, and the anchor. And it allows me to be able to show up in certain ways for a lot of different types of people. So I would be honored to hold that container for you to explore what's possible. And regardless of whether you actually can take advantage of anything that may or may not require an investment of money, but would certainly require an investment of time and other things, I would still commit to doing my very best to leave you better than I found you in that conversation. So for those of you who would like um, to do that, it's very simple. I'm just going to put it in the chat. Uh, oh, there we go. That's what I was going for. Um, to go ahead and go to unmarketablecoach.com/deep dive. Start there, um, book that. So I don't have anything to sell you today. Um, just wondering if what we've talked about seems to resonate. Hopefully, there's parts of that that feel familiar. Hopefully, there's parts of it that even beyond the logic feel new. Um, those are the parts I'd love to explore a little bit more. Some of the parts that are hopeful, but I certainly want to hold space for some of the parts that are still jaded, some of the parts that are still, I've tried that. All of them. I welcome all of that. So I'll hang around for a couple of minutes for any questions that anybody has. I tend to find in these presentations that there aren't usually a lot of questions, and I certainly hope that doesn't deter anyone that has any. But there aren't a lot of questions in this format, in this forum. There usually are quite a few if it was just you and me. And so please, I encourage you to please take advantage of that and book some time with you and me um, to be able to explore this, go a little bit deeper and see what would be next for you. And if what is next for you fits into something that I can offer, awesome. If it doesn't, still awesome. Looking forward to serving in any way I can from the resonance that I hope that you experienced. Um, that is very real right now. It's very real. I've always been passionate about what we talked about today, but I haven't always been as naturally enthusiastic about the way the market would respond to this for each and every person. And I've always been told, well, Paul, it's because it's you and no one else could be you and whatever. And awesome, cool. That's actually exactly what the Unmarketable Coach Project is about, is teaching you to be you, because that's the best thing that's worked for me. So thanks everybody for being here. Again, I'll hang on for just a minute or two if there's any urgent questions that anyone wants to send. And oh, thank you, Yvette. I appreciate that. And you're welcome, Cindy. Chrissy, thanks so much for being here. Please feel free to book a session and let's explore some things that are exciting, some things that might scare you or challenge you, and see if we can create a space that it feels safe enough to explore that and what could take you into maybe some of your blind spots and into some of the things you haven't been able to trust yet, but you've wanted to. So, all right, take care, everybody.